And the reason I think it's so significant is that many people have been challenging the number of those who died that day and were wounded, challenging the pretext that they were all killed or wounded by Hamas, but actually a number, and no one's put an exact number to this, but a number of people on the Israeli side who died that day and were wounded were actually killed or wounded by Israeli fire. And so the significance of this development about the Hannibal directive, it seems from what you're saying that you think it's highly likely it was deployed, is that it may be a number of Israelis were killed that way.
Yeah, you know, Piers, it may be true, and it may have been in the chaotic situation on October the 7th when Palestinian death squads were roaming around southern Israel as they were finished raping and burning and pillaging, and as Palestinians were coming in, it may have happened that that order was given. But
Aaron Mate, you've been listening to this. You've actually been reporting about this Hannibal directive, I believe, for quite some time. You know, hearing Jonathan Garukase, who was a former IDF international spokesman and obviously was in the IDF, hearing him concede that this was highly likely to have happened. What is your reading of this?
It did happen, that's been known for a very long time, from Israeli military sources and witnesses who reported seeing Israeli forces fire on them on October 7th. The difference is that now, finally, an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, has acknowledged this, and more Israeli military sources have come forward. The reporting from Haaretz says, according to one source, that the order was to turn the south of Israel, that frontier with Gaza, into a killing zone, which is exactly what happened. It underscores that Israel has no concern for civilian life, not just inside Gaza, but also its own people, because it did not want to have Hamas take captives that could be used for negotiations to free Palestinian hostages. And that's been lost here. There are thousands of Palestinian hostages in Israeli dungeons. And a major goal of Hamas here was to take captives and use them as leverage to free Palestinians who have been in Israeli dungeons for years and years and years. And excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt you, despite your many falsehoods.
But what you're saying is disgusting.
Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you.
Hamas's murder.
And you're whitewashing mass murder, which is the whole point of suppressing the truth about October 7th since it happened. We have not heard.
Oh, and I guess you are the bearer of truth? A Hamas apologist? You will tell viewers around the world about truth? A propagandist for Hamas, someone who spreads falsehoods and lies about Hamas and apologizes for them and tries to whitewash the killing.
I didn't interrupt you. You're a propagandist for the Israeli military, which is a mass murdering entity. And the whole point of this October 7th propaganda and burying the truth that Israel killed its own people was to manufacture support.
Have you ever been in Israel, Aaron? Have you ever been in Israel?
Have you lived in Israel? Yes, I've lived in Israel.
Have you been in the kibbutzim after October the 7th, Aaron? Have you been here? Have you seen the families? Have you met them? Have you met the survivors? Have you met the hostage survivors?
Can you stop deflecting, interrupting?
No, because you speak as if you have any authority on the matter.
Okay, I speak as
someone who you speak as if you know Israeli civilians, as if you know what Hamas did on October the 7th.
I understand your job as a propagandist.
You haven't watched Israeli civilians murdered by Hamas.
I understand you're doing your job. I'm asking you to shut up now because I didn't interrupt you. You're a propagandist for mass murder, which is why you're trying to shut me up. Excuse me, stop talking. I didn't interrupt you. I let you speak on for minutes. I did not interrupt you. Now, the reason why you want to interrupt me is because I'm acknowledging the facts, which is that Israel did kill its own people on October 7th and hid that truth to manufacture support for its own mass murder campaign inside of Gaza, which has killed tens of thousands of people. That's the atrocity unfolding before our eyes right now.
Aaron, let me jump in here because, Aaron, let me ask you. I mean, it is quite clear from their own admission through the way they were live streaming a lot of the barbaric acts they were committing that Hamas murdered many, many, many people that day. You presumably accept that.
There certainly were atrocities on October 7th. Yes.
Right. I mean, how many people do you believe Hamas killed and wounded?
Well, the point is there should have been an independent investigation of this from the start, which Israel has.
I'm just asking you.
Excuse me.
You're a journalist. You'll have seen all the same stuff as me, right? You'll have seen Hamas terrorists openly boasting about the horrors they were committing. It seems to me that it is indisputable that the vast majority of people who were killed that day were killed by Hamas. Now, what is significant to me is the revelation that this Hannibal directive was issued means that there was clearly some people on the Israeli side who were killed by Israeli forces as part of this open fire without constraints, even if it imperils the lives of Israelis. I don't think we know yet what the split is in terms of numbers, but I think to try and pretend, I mean, you accuse Jonathan Garukase of deflecting, but to try and pretend that the vast majority of people who were killed and wounded that day were not killed and wounded by Hamas would also be a deflection of the truth, wouldn't it?
It would be a deflection of the truth to insist without evidence that the vast majority of people were killed by Hamas. We don't know because there has not been a credible independent investigation, which Israel obviously wants to stop. Now think of it logically here. Certainly, yes, Palestinian militants committed atrocities on October 7th. But think of it logically. If now you have confirmation from Israeli newspapers, Israeli military sources, that a directive was issued to turn that area into a killing zone and to achieve that goal of preventing anyone from crossing back into Gaza. Excuse me, that's exactly what I didn't interrupt you. I'm gonna finish my sentence.
No, that isn't what
excuse me, if that directive, that's exactly what it says. It says in Haaretz. Excuse me, that's what it says. I'll post it online afterwards.
Well, the fact that it says so in Haaretz doesn't make it true. And if you're citing a source, please be specific. And it's a matter of real consequence.
I did. You're lying about my
the directive was turned into a killing zone isn't correct.
All right, well, hang on, please. When you talk over each other, it's very hard to keep up with it. Let me bring in Gideon. Let me bring in Gideon because Gideon.
I'm going to finish my sentence.
Finish your sentence. I'm going to go to Gideon because he actually has work for Hamas.
One of the most sophisticated militaries in the world is employing a directive to turn that area into a killing zone and using its weapons of war, including Apache helicopters, then it's very plausible to assume that, yes, a large number of people were killed by Israel's own forces.
All right, Gideon Levy, I mean, Haaretz has written this thing, and it's gone around the world like wildfire, precisely for the reasons we're seeing in this debate, which is that it does, of course, now raise obvious questions of how many people were killed by who on that horrible, infamous day. What is your understanding? You've seen what this report says. What is your understanding?
After Yaniv Kubovich published his scoop, I SMS'd him, I sent him a text message asking, so Roger Waters was right. And he answered me, no, don't go so far. I've been to the south of Israel 48 hours after the 7th on the 9th, and I saw a slaughterhouse. I have no idea how many of them were killed by Hamas and how many of them were killed by our own soldiers. But let's remember one thing. Whatever happened there, and terrible things happened there, and I am the first one to object any denial, because denial doesn't lead us to anywhere. But whatever happened there does not justify by any means what Israel is doing in the last 9 months. And that's the main point. Was it partly by Hamas and partly by Israeli soldiers, or was it only by Hamas? Nothing can explain or justify slaughtering 38,000 people, most of them innocent people, most of them women and children. And I want to tell Jonathan, or Jonathan as you call him, not everyone who criticizes Israel is a BDS supporter or an anti-Semite or a marginal propagandist. No. There are many people of conscience who cannot see the scenes from Gaza, the scenes that we don't see in Israel. There are many people of conscience who blame Israel, and rightly so. And there are few Israelis who cannot see it and are ashamed for being Israelis when those things are happening. You don't need to label them as anti-Semites. They are people of conscience.
They're denying what happened.
But I've had many people on the pro-Israeli side for many months denying that Israeli forces killed their own. And now I'm hearing that actually it's
highly impossible to deny that. That's called the fog of war. Every war's got that. People, friendly fire is one of the biggest problems.
There's a difference between a fog of war and a deliberate Israeli policy of this Hannibal directive, where you will open fire without constraints, even if it endangers lives of Israelis. I'm sorry. There is a difference between the two things. Let me bring in Jonathan again. Jonathan, on this issue of journalists, why don't you let them in? Surely it would be now in Israel's interest to make this more open.
Piers, you're right, and I agree with you. And I've said this to the IDF behind closed doors. I've said, allow international journalists in. The coverage coming out of Gaza is challenging and negative anyhow. And I think that it would be better, and I thought months ago, and I agree with you, that it would be better to have them inside. It would be better to have international journalists inside. And actually, one of the issues with media coverage in Gaza is that it relies on Palestinian stringers who are all either controlled by Hamas or at least intimidated by Hamas. And there should be.
Well, that's what you get. That's what you get. That's what Israel gets.
That's what you get. Hamas rules.
I have to say, as a journalist, that Israel has brought that on itself. Because if you only allow people inside Palestine to report on this, then you're going to get clearly, probably not the most impartial coverage by definition. So the best way Israel can make it more partial coverage is to let the journalists in. Let me bring in Aaron again.
I agree with you, Piers.
Let me bring in Aaron again.
I agree, Piers.
Okay, well, that's good. We should reach points of agreement on some of these things. Aaron Martin, do you see at the end of this, and look, I just hope and pray this ends soon, but there seems to be no end in sight. But given that there's increasing protest now from within Israel trying to bring this to an end, what happens after this war? And let's put aside for a moment the second front of Hezbollah and what may be happening there. Let's focus entirely on what happens in Gaza after this. Do you think there can be any role for anybody left from Hamas to govern or part govern Gaza going forward?
That's not up to me.
What's your opinion?
Well, that's not up to me.
I'm not saying it's up to you. People of Gaza. It's not up to you, but what is your opinion?
Let me finish my sentence. The point is, the people of Gaza have been denied their right to life, not just since October 7th, but for decades now. Living under the longest running military occupation in the world that has denied Palestinians their basic rights.
I understand that.
So it's up to them to decide, and they have the right to live in freedom. That's the fundamental problem here. Your previous guest spoke about how we want to bring freedom and liberty to Gaza. No, Israel doesn't. Israel's imposing the longest running military occupation in the world, and to enforce that now, it's destroying Gaza.
Why are you prepared? Okay, but why are you prepared, Aaron?
It's not to me.
Why you say it's not up to you to comment on Hamas? You're very happy to comment on Israel's government, and there's an inconsistency there. If you're prepared to speak on behalf of Israel and criticize the Israeli government, why are you not prepared to criticize Hamas, who are the governing party over in Gaza?
I'm very well prepared to criticize Hamas. My friends in Gaza are not big fans of Hamas, but my point is it's up to them. And there's no parity here. We're not talking about
your opinion.
We're not. Okay, I'm telling you my opinion. I'm telling it to you. We're not talking about two equal sides. We're talking about an Israeli regime.
I'm not saying we are.
Running the longest running military occupation in the world.
Do you think, given what they perpetrated on October the 7th, can there be any possibility of any peace going forward, so long as any single person from Hamas remains in any kind of government position going forward?
By that standard, no Israeli has the right to govern because they've been perpetrating not just atrocities.
But again, you're defecting. You're doing the very thing you accused Jonathan of doing. I'm going to come to Israel's government. I'm going to come to the Israeli side. But right now, I'm asking you about Hamas, who took over in 2005, and who, by their actions on October the 7th, to me, made it absolutely crystal clear they are not able to govern that country anymore, or govern Palestine anymore. And so my question, I think, is a legitimate one. As we come out of this going forward, there are some people who think that whoever's left from Hamas should be allowed to continue to have some kind of governmental role. I say that is for the birds, that you cannot have anyone from Hamas involved in any government in Gaza going forward. There are legitimate questions, by the way, about a number of people in the Israeli government. I don't think Netanyahu should stay. I don't think Ben-Gvir should stay. I don't think Smotrich should stay. But right now, I don't see any role for anyone from Hamas. Do you?
Okay, and I'm going to answer your question. It's up to Palestinians because they're the ones being occupied. Can I say that Joe Biden has no right to govern because he's fueling?
You have a right to say that. Of course you do.
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to
You're very judgmental of Israel's government, but you won't be judgmental.
Yes, because they're a military occupier that have been depriving freedom of Palestinians for decades now.
Tell us more
Let me say one more thing.
It's like
Let me say one more thing.
okay.
Let me say one more thing.
Don't talk over each other, please. It doesn't help.
there was some negative talk of Palestinian journalists in Gaza before. I want to correct that. These are the bravest journalists in the world, and that's why they've been slaughtered by the dozens by Israel. These people are putting their lives on the line to bring people the truth of what's happening to their people. They deserve to be praised.
I don't disagree. By the way, just to be clear, I don't disagree with you, but I think it's absolutely obvious that this human nature would dictate that if the only people reporting or allowed to report by Israel are people on the ground who are Palestinian, it is more likely than not, isn't it, that they are not all going to be completely impartial. And that's my main argument.
Yes, victims of mass murder. Yes, correct.
I understand. I'm just saying,
mass murder.
Yeah, I understand. Whatever the reasons, they are unlikely to be overly impartial as a group.
Yes,
and that's
when your
why,
home is being destroyed, people are being killed.
I don't think many Israeli journalists would be impartial either. So I'm saying that international journalists who are neither Israeli or Palestinian should be allowed in so that they can offer genuinely impartial coverage. At the moment, they're not allowed in.
Yes, and along with journalists, let's also stop blocking food, fuel, medicine,
I do not disagree with you.
As has been the explicit order.
Let me bring in Gideon Levy. You've been waiting patiently. Gideon, how does this war end?
There are two possibilities right now, and there is no third one. Either Gaza will continue to be controlled by Hamas, a weaker Hamas, maybe a more moderate one, I don't know, I'm not sure it's possible, or Gaza will turn into Somalia. There's no third option, unless Israel stays in Gaza forever. We have to realize that Israel totally failed in crashing Hamas. I could tell it from the first day, because it was an impossible goal to achieve. And we are now 9 months later, and Hamas is the sovereign in Gaza, and we cannot do anything right now, and nobody will be able to do anything without the approval of Hamas. Do I like it? No, but that's a matter of fact. If Hamas will fall apart, we'll get a Somalia, and I'm not sure which one is better for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, or for the world. But Piers, let me just say one sentence about denial, because the rabbi from the settlement say that the deniers are anti-Semites. There are no bigger deniers than the Israelis.
That's true. That's what I said.
Just a second. Let me finish.
Please. Go ahead.
Israel, for 100 years, is denying the catastrophes of the Palestinian people. From the Nakba until what's going on now in Gaza, it's a long history of denying the suffering of the other people. What a chutzpah is it to come and complain about someone who denies what happens on the 7th of October when we never recognize the Nakba, the catastrophe, the national catastrophe of the Palestinian people, the occupation, the apartheid, and now what's going on, the mass killing in Gaza. It's okay when Israel denies everything, because Israel is always the only victim, Israel is the only one who suffers, and dare you to think about anyone else who suffers around us.
Okay, why has there been a spike now in new settlements on the West Bank, including retroactively authorizing 3 outposts? How can that do anything but massively inflame the already extremely tense atmosphere around the West Bank? And how is this defensible?
It's not only is it defensible, it's the only way forward. The only way forward is for the Jewish people to live in their land, to push back on the Palestinian Authority and the Hamas and those entities, to assert sovereignty. So, hold on, I'm not American. I was born in Israel. My parents were Russian refuseniks. Read the freaking Wikipedia. For God's sakes, I served in the army here, and I just came back to the reserves. Please do me a favor. Do me a favor. I was born in Haifa. I speak Hebrew and English. You are a Canadian from nowhere. You have nothing to do with anything. All you know is dysphoria.
You're a Russian settler, not an American settler.
You're just
stealing Palestinian land.
You're nothing but a talking head on TV. You have nothing to do with this land. You have nothing to do with this place. You keep saying
it. I've nothing to do with mass murder.
Go back to Canada and your little books behind you. You have nothing to do with this region. You don't speak the languages of this region. You're not from here. You never served here. I spoke to Arabs today. I am from here. I was born in Haifa, Israel. My parents fought to come to this land from the Russian Soviet regime. And you are just a Canadian sitting out there sniping with your little understandings of things. Go back and read.
We have a lot more common ethnically than you do with anybody from that land.
Do me a favor. I am an ethnic Jewish person. Yes, sir.
Rabbi Fleischer, how do you justify the expansion of settlements at this particular time all over the West Bank?
Justified. I laud it. I'm proud of it. I can't be prouder about this government.
Hezbollah exists because Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, killed tens of thousands of people. It's a resistance force. Hezbollah said its goals are very limited. It wants Israel to agree to a ceasefire.
Get your history straight from afar.
You don't even know history
because you don't know it. You don't live here. You never were in a bomb shelter from a Hezbollah rocket.
Why the Israelis need to be re-educated and de-radicalized. And the Israeli who supports mass murder and apologizes for it.
You don't even know the history that you read in Wikipedia. Get your numbers straight, Aaron.
Israel did in 1982 and killed tens of, and after that is when Hezbollah was formed. That's fact. Now, please, I'm going to finish this thought. If Israel wants genuine peace and security, it can agree to the entire international consensus, which everybody except for Israel and the U.S. supports. That's a contiguous Palestinian state, which for Palestinians is a major compromise. Only 22% of their historic homeland is what Palestinians, including Hamas, have previously accepted. A Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. Israel, since its founding, has been trying to destroy and crush Palestinian national identity. That's why Israel has had all these wars, starting in 1948. When by the time Arab armies invaded, you had Israel already expelling more than half of the Palestinian refugees that were created there. And you can play that playbook over and over and over. That's why Hezbollah exists, is to resist Israeli aggression. Hezbollah has said that it will stop its strikes on Israel if Israel simply agrees to a ceasefire. Even Israeli generals are now saying that they want a ceasefire. The main obstacle now is Netanyahu and his extremist coalition, which for its own political survival, in complete disregard for Palestinian civilian life, as they've made clear, and also their own captives, they're the ones wanting to continue this war because they're bent on surviving politically and also leaving Gaza in ruins, because their ultimate goal is, as these two radical extremist settler apologists have made clear, they want to control Gaza because they do not see Palestinians as equal human beings, and that is the fundamental problem.
All right,
let's de-radicalize Israeli apologists like these two, and then we can have peace.
Let's try and keep it non-ad hominem. It makes things so much more civilized. Let me bring in Gideon again. The hostage negotiations.
They called me a Hamas apologist. I'm returning the favor.
I think it doesn't. You know what? It doesn't. You know something. It doesn't do any of you. It doesn't do any of you any favours. Ad hominem attacks don't do anyone any favours. We bring in Gideon. Gideon, the hostage negotiations continue. Netanyahu's sent a team of negotiators to discuss the latest phase of these negotiations. Ultimately, there are still well over 100 Israeli hostages who are believed to be being still held by Hamas. There was a baby who was kidnapped. No one knows what's happened to that baby. Other young children were kidnapped. I mean, do you believe every one of those hostages should be released immediately?
No doubt, but there is a price for it. It doesn't go like this. Look,
how can there be a price for hostages?
No.
I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. How can there be a price?
That's interesting.
How can you kidnap a baby?
I'll tell you exactly. Israel holds thousands of Palestinians without trial. They are hostages.
Any
Why
babies?
does Israel keep them?
Are there any babies?
Why? Children. Israel killed enough babies. Let's not get into this
literally kidnapped a 1-year-old baby.
Let's not get into this comparison.
Yes, you said there's a price. I'm sorry, hang on. You said there's a price on the kidnapping of a 1-year-old baby. How can that be? How can that be? That there is a price for the return of a kidnapped baby?
You cannot put this resolution because there is also a price for a baby who remained alone in the world with all his parents, brothers and sisters and grandparents were killed in front of his eyes. What about his fate? He doesn't interest you. You think really that we are the only victims here? You really think that the world can take attention only for one baby who was kidnapped, which is a horrible scene, and not see 17,000 children?
I think there are. No, I didn't say that. I think there are victims on both sides, but I am going to pick you up on what you say. When I hear someone like you, Gideon, when you say that in response to me saying a 1-year-old baby was kidnapped has not been returned, you say there's a price to be paid. That fills me with horror, and I'm horrified by a lot of what's happening to Palestinian children. Horrified.
Yes.
But there should be no price on a kidnapped baby.
Yes. Yes, this baby shouldn't have been kidnapped, and it's barbaric to kidnap him. They should have left him with his parents back, even if they went to a liberation operation, whatever they want to call it. They should have not touched this baby, and it's horrible. Don't get me there because there are no doubts about it. We are all human beings. But you ask about the hostages, not about one baby. And the hostages are the asset that the Palestinians have now. Like Israel, for example, is keeping, maintaining, robbing hundreds of bodies, if not thousands of bodies, claiming officially that this is for negotiations. So bodies are okay for negotiations, for bargaining, and hostages are not okay for bargaining. I wish everyone will be released.